everyone, Judith Garten here from Torah for Women Ministries, and this is the proper portion. I wanted to show you a quick video of how simple it is to process your autumn pumpkins and squashes into wonderful ingredients to use throughout your winter and spring months until your garden starts producing again. We plant a variety of squash that includes jack-o'-lanterns, pie pumpkins, Cushaw, butternut, and even spaghetti squash type. Now, for this particular video, we are not going to be processing spaghetti squash because that is completely different. My favorite way to prep the pumpkins, butternut, and Cushaw squash is actually a simple steam, puree, and freeze method. And yes, I did specifically stress freeze. Why? Because I no longer pressure can pureed pumpkin or squash of any kind for our pantry. Over the last decade or two, a lot has changed in this area, and it currently goes against all recommendations of the experts to can squash purees. Although many of us had done it for decades without any problems, changes came about as it was discovered and tested that the center of the jar of squash puree does not always get to the proper temperature to kill bacteria. If it's not hot enough during pressure canning, that bacteria could cause potential problems and risks for your family. And remember, from other videos I've said, safety first. It is always better to err on the side of caution when your family's health is at stake. So instead, we've been freezing the puree in 2-cup containers and zipper bags. Now this quick little video will explain exactly how simple it is to accomplish. Now, let's get this squash processed. First step, always, of course, pick your produce when it's ripe. You can process it immediately, or you can allow your squashes to cure and use them through the fall for decor in your home. We like to place them around in bowls for our Feast of Sukkot and on through the Thanksgiving celebrations. Step 2. When ready to process your squash, wash them thoroughly on the outside, scrubbing off any dirt that may have been left behind. I use either a brush or a fresh dish sponge. Step 3. You will notice the butternut. I cut the neck off first. I do that same processing with a Cushaw squash because it's got a large neck as well. That part is the meatiest part, and then I take those and I split them into chunks. I also split the bulb with a sharp knife, but I do that very carefully, watching that I don't cut through any of the seeds. I want to be able to save them for next year's garden or for snacks. Step 4. Scrape those seeds and strings out with a large, thin-bowled serving spoon, setting all of that goop aside in a big bowl. Then later, you're going to separate those seeds from the strings and do one of two things. You can either dry the seeds for next year's garden, like I mentioned, or you can toast the seeds for snacks with a drizzle of melted butter or extra virgin olive oil. Sprinkle them with a touch of sea salt, and sometimes cayenne pepper makes them spicy too. I'll link to a recipe in the description below. Step 5. Decide now, are you going to peel your squash before or after steaming? I tend to like to steam it in the skins. That way it's easy to remove them after the squash is nice and soft. You can see that I did that for this video. Chunk the pieces of squash to fit into your large pot. I use a large steamer pasta pot that has a large metal basket for easy straining. Step 6. Place all your chunks into that large pot or steaming basket. Add enough water to just steam the squash, not boil it to death. Cover your pot and bring it to a boil. Once it's boiling, reduce the heat and simmer covered until done. This could take a while depending on the size of the chunks that you're using, sometimes 15 to 30 minutes, maybe a little longer. When the squash chunks are soft, remove the pot from the heat. Then, carefully remove your pieces of squash to peel them, if needed. Place the peeled chunks into your blender jar, your food processor, or other container to be blended until smooth. Step 7. If your puree is a little watery, you can place it into a large pot and simmer until the water is cooked down to the consistency you desire, or you can use a crock pot and allow it to cook off overnight. On a low setting, please. If you're using the stovetop method, remember to stir it regularly to prevent burning or scorching to the bottom. I did not need to simmer this year's batch of butternut and other squashes. It was just the right consistency for what we're going to be needing. Step 8. If you've cooked it down, You're going to need to allow it to cool. Scoop that pureed squash into containers or zipper bags, label and freeze. And remember, you want to label the quantity in your bag as well as the date. I always put it in bags, about 2 cups per bag, because that's about what we use in one recipe for generalized recipes. If I need 4 cups, I've got it. Oh, and remember, don't waste the water in the bottom of the pot either. That water from steaming often has squash or pumpkin debris and juice in it. It makes a great vegetable broth for winter soups. I let it cool, then freeze that broth in 2 to 4 cup containers. It also makes a nice broth for times of illness. Bring to a boil, add some salt and herbs to taste, and simmer for 30 minutes. Serve just as you would any broth or tea. How do I use our frozen squash puree? For anything that we might use pumpkin puree. Soups, pies, breads, cookies, jelly roll, and more. We feel that the butternut is creamier than pumpkin, by the way, and a bit richer than plain pumpkin. I hope this has helped you in figuring out how to process your squashes. Please remember, this is for freezing only. It is not recommended to pressure can or water bath can any squashes that are pureed. See our other video on this topic. And shalom.